there, welcome to episode 6 of the Electrium podcast. Long time no see, and on this podcast we're going to be talking all things AFDDs, or art fault detection devices, if you want the longer name. Joining me on this episode, back after episode 2, Mike Cash, Group Marketing Manager for Electrium. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Was that a little
fist bump?
A little cry from the crowd there for you as well?
Yeah.
Also on these debut, we've got Dave Garrett, Head of Product Management for Circuit Protection at Electrium. Hello, Dave.
Hi, guys.
Dave, first time doing a podcast, I believe, for you. Am I right, or have you been a podcast connoisseur for many years?
No, I think I'm a podcast virgin, if that's the right phrase.
So just to break us in gently into the episode, I'm going to do a bit of an icebreaker. Dave, I'm going to ask you this very controversial question. Sauces, you know, like your ketchups and your mayos and your barbecue sauces, where are you keeping them, fridge or cupboard?
Cupboard.
So you don't put anything, all in cupboard?
No, actually some go in the fridge, yeah.
Have you got a certain, like, for example, certain ones go in the fridge?
I think the mayonnaise and that go in the fridge,
yeah,
and ketchup tends to go in the cupboard. Not sure why, but that's the way it is.
Exactly. Mike, where do you stand on the fridge or cupboard debate?
I'm exactly the same as Dave. Mayonnaise in the fridge, made of eggs, going to go off.
When you go to the supermarket, do you ever see the eggs in the fridge compartments? Where do you put your eggs in the fridge if they'd been sold in the non-refrigerated bit? Just for something for everybody to think of.
The last time I went to a supermarket, I lost my son, so my wife doesn't let me go anymore.
And that's a story for another podcast. Anyway, on that note, let's talk about arc fault detection devices. After episode 2, where we talked about them briefly, we've had more questions coming in about AFDDs, so we thought we'd get together and try and answer some of these questions for you. So let's start from the top. Arc fault, what is it? Explain.
Okay, well, an arc fault is a dangerous electrical fault that can lead to a fire. And it leads to a fire through ignition of combustible materials, and that combustible material can include the insulation of the cable itself.
All right, then. Okay, so that's an arc fault for you. So then what are the benefits on AFDDs then? What benefits can they provide?
Well, the AFDDs are detecting and disconnecting dangerous arc faults, and that's something that existing circuit protection devices may not be picking up. So we're trying to prevent fires, and AFDDs can do that.
Because is there a stat that there's about 13,000 electrical fires every year?
More than 13,000 electrical fires across Britain in each year, not reducing very much. So there's obviously a need for action to be taken, and arc fault detection devices can be part of that action.
I apologise. I've realised I've got the most squeakiest chair in the world. So I know that people listening to this might just, if I make the slightest movement, there we go, there's a little squeak right there. Right, another question we get is this technology, is our AFDDs proven? Where are the stats on AFDDs?
Well, AFDDs, the technology itself has been around for probably over 15 years. So, particularly in the United States, where they were pioneered, they're known as arc fault circuit interrupters, so slightly different terminology, but it's the same sort of technology. So they've been around about 15 years, and over that time, the adoption of AFCIs in America has reduced the number of fires that are occurring in domestic properties. So they're well proven with a track record.
Am I right in thinking it's kind of well adopted in America as well?
Yeah, it's across most of America. It's also Canada. It's moved across into Australia, and you've got places like Germany which have also mandated it.
So it's one of those things, if it's been used worldwide in a lot of places, then no reason why it can't be used here.
Not at all. I mean, I think it's something that will spread across the world, and particularly across Europe.
So another question we get in quite frequently as well is, can an AFDD be susceptible to a false alarm or nuisance tripping, for example?
I think the bottom line is that an AFDD will detect a fault and will react to that fault. In terms of people referring to nuisance tripping, then like any product, then if there's something on the circuit that is not operating perhaps within its normal standards or normal conditions, then it may have an impact on AFDD technology.
I think the situation is that an AFDD is looking for a certain characteristic, just like an RCD is looking for a certain characteristic. If it sees it, it operates. It operates because it's seen what it's been programmed to do. And then it's down to the contractor to find out exactly what that is.
I mean, I think if you go back to, the introduction of RCDs, for example, when they came into the market, We used to get calls, they've installed an RCD, my circuit was working fine previously and now it's tripping, and every time I put the kettle on, well, the RCD's, it's detecting a fault, and in that circumstance it's doing exactly what it's designed to do. So I think you will find that some installers will fit AFDDs either to new or existing circuits, and they will trip, and it's then, as Mike has just said, it's about identifying the cause of the tripping. I think the reality is that majority of the time there will be tripping because there is an arc fault.
And we've had people report that to us. They've fitted AFDDs, they've found that the device is tripping, they've investigated the circuit, and in one case found a plug top with a poorly connected termination which was actually suffering overheating, discoloured, darkened and blackened to the point where it had actually blackened the socket it was plugged into.
Wow, okay.
And it had gone unnoticed. So, you know, that's not a nuisance trip, but it felt like a nuisance trip because the homeowner didn't understand why it was happening.
You know, it might not have turned into a fire today or tomorrow, but at some point it may have done. And that particular one, I think, was in an airing cupboard, lots of
combustibles
around it. The whole house could have gone up. You know, so it just illustrates that this technology does what it says on the tin.
So another question here. We've been having this quite recently as well on our social channels. What kind of circuits can AFDDs work on? Ring circuits is one we get. Lighting circuits is another. What's the answer here? Where can they work circuit-wise?
Well, the AFDDs will work on all circuits. There will be either series arcs or parallel arcs that can exist, and the reality is that on a ring circuit, the parallel arc is the one that will exist, and the AFDD will detect that. You won't get a serial arc in a ring circuit, so that arc can't exist, so the AFD has got nothing to detect. Where you can find serial arcs in particular and parallel arcs is on any spur or any appliance that is plugged into that ring circuit. So effectively you're creating a spur off of the ring circuit. When you've got a single cable, that's where you can have serial arcs, and if you've got a serial arc, existing circuit protection devices will not detect that. So the bottom line is AFDDs will work on all circuits.
We've also had a couple of concerns come in about will it change electricians' working practices in terms of having to test the AFDD? Will they have to do anything different with that particular device?
It's just like installing an RCBO, just like installing a breaker. It fits onto the bus bar in exactly the same way. The outgoing cables are connected the same way. The circuits are pre-tested beforehand in the same way, and the testing that you carry out afterwards, as you in your final tests on your initial verification, are exactly the same as you do for an RCBO.
And am I right in thinking there's a self-test function there as well?
Yeah, I mean, every time you switch on the AFDD, then it will perform a self-test, and it also performs a self-test every 15 hours. So every 15 hours, it's changing the time during the day when it's doing that self-test. So it's not sort of seeing the same loads at a particular time of day regularly. So it's alternating. So it's doing that self-test. If it decides that the electronics is not working correctly, then it will trip. And when you then put the toggle back onto the live position, then you'll get a flashing light, and it will determine whether the product is operational or whether you actually need to obviously replace the device.
Will they need to get a larger consumer unit to install AFDDs in?
Not at all, no.
Well, not with Electrium devices.
Yeah, Electrium devices are single module devices, so they take up the space that an MCB or an RCBO previously took up. So you don't need a larger consumer unit. As an example, in most cases they're retrofittable in existing consumer units as well.
In some cases you can actually use a smaller consumer unit, which might surprise some people, because the market has probably seen some AFDDs that are 3 modules wide and some AFDDs that are 2 modules wide. It's probably just getting used to the fact that Electrium has got 1 module wide devices. And then if you take those one module devices and you fit them into a main switch consumer unit, and you take your average 10 ways, the unit is actually smaller than a dual RCD or a split load.
Okay, then, so what kind of consumer units then can they be fitted in? Okay, so we don't have to buy a large consumer unit, which is a big plus. So what type of consumer units can you put AFDDs in?
Well, they'll fit in any consumer unit that will accommodate an RCBO, so a main switchboard, a high integ board, a split load board. What they won't do is fit within a dual RCD board.
Okay, one of the big questions we get in about AFDDs is obviously under the 18th edition of the wiring regulations, they are recommended. So, Mike, what does recommended mean then?
Well, it doesn't mean ignore it. And you have to look at the regulation and you have to understand the full wording of the regulation. They're recommended for a purpose. The regulation clearly states that they're recommended to provide additional protection against fires. Okay, that should be enough to get your attention.
The point I'd make is, I mean, I'm a lifelong cyclist, and the highway code doesn't mandate that I wear a cycle helmet. It recommends that you wear a cycle helmet, and I think most people would recommend that you wear a cycle helmet when you're out on the road, because it provides that additional protection. And, you know, to my mind, this is exactly the same situation here.
So AFDDs, what we talked before, that they've been around 10 or 15 years now worldwide, but in the UK they're what you'd say more of a new technology to our market. So obviously because of that, and one of the questions, the most common question we get in is about price. So how, for an installer, do they justify that price when they're looking to fit an AFDD in?
I guess it's a decision about things like how much risk do I want to take. You know, most people will insure their house. You're not necessarily obliged to insure your house, but the last thing you want to do is have it burned down. And, you know, to my mind, this is another way of protecting your assets. And it's not just a house and your irreplaceables, it might be your family as well. So personally, to me, it's a no-brainer. I'm risk averse. I would fit AFDDs even if it costs me a considerable amount of money.
Mike, safety first is the message.
I think
really,
safety first is the message that all electrical installers actually have when they really question themselves and ask, what am I going to do here? But just to pick up on Dave's point, you pay for your AFDDs up front when you have your installation completed. Typical life of an electrical installation, 25, 30 years. Spread the cost. How much is it costing you each year? It's a minimal amount. There's no doubt the costs will come down over time. RCBO costs came down over time. MCB costs came down over time. Metal consumer units came down over time. We need the community, electrical community, to take up the option of using these devices. Join us in providing higher levels of electrical safety, and the prices will come down.
Is there any other points, gentlemen, you want to make on AFDDs at all? Anything else you want to cover? Things that people may not be aware of at all before we wrap up this episode?
We get questions about fault finding sometimes. So if you take an Electrium AFDD, the new single module device, it indicates on its flashing LEDs to tell you what type of fault it's detected. Now, having been an electrician for many years before I came to do this job, I would have loved the device to tell me what type of fault had happened, because it speeds up fault finding, it speeds up remedial work. And the integrated RCBO that's built into the AFDD, it's the only one on the marketplace which will tell you it's tripped on an earth fault. It's got some inbuilt overvoltage protection as well. So this device is doing a lot of things over and above what people are getting from an RCD and a few MCBs joined together. This is a much more sophisticated method of providing circuit protection. And don't forget, the regulations require installations to be designed and installed so as to protect people and property from the risks associated with use of electricity. That's not abuse, it's not misuse, it's reasonable use. And those risks include fire risks. So it's a requirement to provide all of those relevant protections, whatever form of device you choose.
Good. And on another episode, we'll find out more about this story about how you lost yours from the supermarket. That's for another day.
That's for another day.
Okay, thank you very much for tuning in. If you do have a question about AFDDs, just feel free to let us know. Social media, we're at Electrium News on Twitter and Electrium Sales Limited both on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you go on our website and go on our 18th edition section, we have a whole host of content there about AFDDs, and you can find out more as well about these clever little devices. But on that note, we'll leave this episode and look out. We've got loads of different episodes in our back catalogue. If you're new to the Electrium podcast, we've got episodes talking about apprenticeships, getting onto YouTube, about somebody who gave up all their work and travelled the world and what they've learned for that to help their business going forward, and much more. But for this episode, thank you, gentlemen, and we will see you all another time.